everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. You got me and you got Nate. Nate, how are things going?
Oh, great. So it's weird to me because I'll see stuff online where people will talk about like, oh, look, it's late summer. I'm going to do some late summer things while it's still very warm. And meanwhile, here I am in England when it's legitimately already fall weather. So I find myself kind of laughing at that because, yeah, go figure. It hit November 1st, or correction, it hit September 1st, and it immediately became fall weather. I'm like, I get why there are all these like historical depictions of seasons because they actually change like on schedule here, as opposed to even the north in America, but certainly the south, where like it doesn't feel like fall weather until basically November.
Yeah, there's this candle company that my wife was working for that they were out in LA is where they were based in. And us in St. Louis, we get normal seasons and whatnot. They don't get that in LA. So like come fall, they were like, "Hey, where's all the fall scents?" They're like, "Oh, we'll release those things in like October." Like, that's way too late, man. It's fall now. Fall, like you should be assuming autumn like September 1st. Like whether or not you feel it or not. You gotta assume because it's hot as fuck still here. So, but still buying up that pumpkin spice.
I can remember it being hotter than hell in Georgia in September, and similarly, even in Indiana, I remember like getting some particularly warm end of summer weeks. But what's interesting here is that yeah, like legitimately meteorological autumn for British weather forecasting starts September 1st, and I can actually understand why that is because it's legitimately we've had days where like the highs are in the 50s already, and technically it's still summer. So yeah, it's wild. It's a whole new experience. It wasn't, if I remember correctly, it wasn't quite like this in Germany when I was a kid. But then again, Germany is where I was in Germany is further south and is like warmer on average than I think the United Kingdom is, or at least in southern England. So
But
who
it's not
knows?
gonna
But
it's not gonna get all that cold there though, is it?
no,
Like
not at all. No,
you're
like
gonna get some snow maybe, but it's not gonna be like sub-zero or anything on a regular basis.
no, really not at all. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think this past winter was particularly warm on average. I think it was pretty typical, and we had a couple of days where it got below freezing at night. But most days in the winter, it kind of hovered around like the lows were in like the mid 30s to high 30s, and the highs were like in the 40s, more or less, maybe a little bit in the low 50s. It snowed twice, but it didn't stick for very long. So yeah, all things considered, you get a super mild winter here. There's definitely parts of this country of the United Kingdom where it gets very cold in winter, but I think you have to be pretty high up on mountains and in the north or like in Scotland and stuff for to really get that. As opposed to New York, where we had a cold snap my first year there, where I want to say from around Christmas until basically the end of January, it didn't get above freezing. Like it didn't necessarily, it wasn't necessarily below 0 Fahrenheit all that often. I don't think it got that cold, but it was in like the single digits at night. But it legitimately didn't get above 32 Fahrenheit for a month. I think this country Britain has had winters like that before, but from what I can tell, the place basically shut the fuck down because that's so unheard of. And also, a lot of buildings here have single paned windows, like old buildings, because housing shortage. They can charge through the nose for any kind of housing, even if it's shit. And as a result, you'll have places where like it's legitimately cold indoors because the windows are drafty and stuff like that. So if you start having Midwest winters here, which I mean, who knows if the Gulf Stream gets fucked up? It's possible. Lord only knows. What that would look like, because I think much like the hot weather problem, where like nowhere has air conditioning here, and a lot of buildings have relatively like low ceilings. They're not prepared for disgusting New York City heat, or God knows like southern United States heat. Similarly, they wouldn't be prepared, I think, for like Midwest winters if they start having weather that is perhaps more in line with the kind of weather you face at similar latitudes in North America.
I'm trying to imagine like Mad Max, but in England.
So, little peek behind the curtain here. I started recording because I'm recording at home, and I forgot to put my fake teeth in. So, if you were wondering why I was veering towards Sylvester the cat there, that's not my normal speaking voice. It's just I'm missing one of my front teeth. So, unfortunately, I have to wear a denture. But unlike other people who wear dentures who are running for president, mine won't fall out in the middle of my racist speech about a guy named Corn Pop.
Corn Pop 2020, obviously. Like, I don't know who this guy is, but he wrapped a chain around his arm and was about to fuck up Joe Biden, so he's got my vote.
I mean, anybody who's going to bring it to Joe Biden, who's going to make him start sweating out of his hair plugs, you know what? I'm there for it. So we have some great stories, some breaking news over the weekend. If we were a cool podcast, we'd have like a breaking news sound, like dun dun dun, because of something that's happened over the weekend that's disrupted our normal plans. In this case, drone strikes damaged a significant amount of Saudi Arabia's oil refinement capacity. So as such, about 50% of their capacity has been taken offline by some drone attacks, which makes me laugh. But I'm going to read the opening paragraphs from a piece we found on military.com. It's called, the headline is, Trump says U.S. locked and loaded in response to drone attack. So it says, tensions are flaring in the Persian Gulf after President Donald Trump said the U.S. is, quote, locked and loaded, unquote, to respond to a weekend drone assault on Saudi Arabia's energy infrastructure that his aides blamed on Iran, of course. The attack, which halved the kingdom's oil production and sent crude prices spiking, led Trump to authorize the release of U.S. strategic reserves should they be necessary to stabilize the markets. Trump said that the U.S. had reason to believe it knew who was behind the attack. His Secretary of State blamed Iran the previous day and said his government was waiting to consult with the Saudis as to who they believe was behind the attack and, quote, under what terms we would proceed, exclamation point, unquote. Trump also responded with another tweet in all caps that just said, plenty of oil.
Yeah, plenty of oil means 36 days. We have 36 days of oil in our strategic oil reserve. And, like, the thing that kills me is that this should be the real big wake-up call of, like, ooh, we should really move to renewable energies and not be relying on, like, a refinement and energy source that will literally catch on fire if it gets hit with a drone. Like, here, people have been asking where somebody with these people might find it. Go to wish.com. I'm sure you can find a fucking drone that can deliver a bomb that can do some damage like this. But it is insane to me, like, how weak the fucking Saudi infrastructure is that 50% of their production gets shut down by some drone strikes. Like, we don't even have that good of an attrition rate with drones. We just blow up a wedding. Like, we kill some people.
Fuck, man.
Right, we drive, fly, blow up a thing, blow up a wedding, fly away, and then, you know, somebody in fucking McCree Air Force Base, like, high fives and goes home and, like, drinks himself to death. But, like, these guys, the Houthis, managed to strap some bombs to some drones, fly them over to Saudi Arabia, drop some shit, and, like, completely bring the world economy, like, make the world economy shit itself, basically. Incredible. Just absolutely incredible.
Absolutely incredible. Like, I know that the Houthis get a bad rap sometimes for some of the insane shit they say, but my God, I have to begrudgingly respect the Houthis because of how much they hate Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia fucking sucks. So having the Saudis be humiliated is great to me. My concern is, of course, that it's anything that happens along these lines, especially with as big of a dumbass as Mike Pompeo as the Secretary of State, can be weaponized to then turn around and blame Iran. And yes, I recognize that the Houthis have the support of the Iranian government, and that, as I understand it, they're a Shiite faction in Yemen. But I don't know. It blows my mind that this happened. That B, if these were legitimately like Walmart drones with fucking grenades on them or some shit, that the Saudis couldn't intercept them. C, that it seems so cynical and so obvious. And the fact that Bolton got fired, and Bolton was like the big hard-on for war dude about Venezuela, but also Saudi Arabia or Iran, the fact that this is happening now, like, it doesn't surprise me at all. I think that if there's any one lesson I can take away from this, it's that no matter what happens, they're going to fall all over themselves. Like, legitimately, if Iran breathes they fall all over themselves like World Cup players where someone has like tapped them with a finger on the shoulder. And I just think that it's so much less convincing than it was in the early 2000s when they managed to, finagle their way into a war with Iraq. I really don't think that this stuff. I mean, the Trump morons who are like, "Burn my house down, daddy. I just want to do racism." Like, they'll support it even if like they literally can't afford to put gas in their cars. But I don't think that they are the majority. In fact, I think they're a pretty small minority compared to other Americans who kind of like don't want this shit. I don't know. You're actually in America though, Francis.
I mean, look, nobody wants another war, except I tell you who's probably really sad is John Bolton, who's going to be so mad if we go to war with Iran and he doesn't get to jack off in the Situation Room while we're fucking bombing Tehran. But look, nobody wants to fucking go to war. Like, here's the thing: if when something like this happens, right? So you open, you open up the Wall Street Journal, you shake it open, you sit there eating your avocado toast like the millennial that you are, and you read that one country has blown up another country in the Middle East. Like, generally, it's just going to be like, I mean, that's what they're doing, right? That's what they've been doing for years. We know they do that. But then for anybody to be like, yep, and then that's why we all have to go die over there, it's going to make a lot of people fucking pump the brakes on this one. I can't. I don't imagine, like, I know that there's a lot of people just based on Twitter who are huge fans of Israel, which I get. I mean, it's dumb, but I understand at least that mentality. I really don't think there's a whole lot of Saudi Arabia stands out there that are not like literally already being bought by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia itself. So I cannot imagine, like, what would that war be? Like, okay, you stand in front of, the 101st Airborne Division. They're like, all right, guys, we're all going to fucking get into your chalks. We're all going to get into our planes and go overseas because Iran blew up an oil facility in Saudi Arabia. And God damn it, that means that gas is expensive now. Like, that entire, and don't get me wrong, that's literally exactly what will probably end up happening. But it is an insane thing that, like, I don't see how you sell this war to the American people. I don't know, like, as public affairs, as a person who is trained to help sell fucking wars to the American people sometimes, there is no way to sell this one. There wasn't any real. I mean, you could get away with it with Afghanistan, obviously, because of the 9/11. You could kind of get away with it. Yeah, you could kind of get away with it with Iraq.
I think in Iraq, yeah, like there was just this. It was a lot easier to convince people that there was a direct correlation, that there were, that Saddam Hussein had some role or was trying to have some role, involved with Al Qaeda, which is ridiculous if you know anything about the region. But obviously, they were able to sell it successfully, and there were a lot of Americans who were just like, "Fuck it, we want revenge for what happened, even if it makes no sense."
Yeah, it was not difficult to sell a war against Saddam Hussein, but Saddam's been dead for over a decade at this point. Shit, Bin Laden's been dead for 8 years now. We just killed his son, so there's not a whole lot like where it's just like, okay, but what's what does mission complete? What does victory look like here? And I just don't know what it is. Like, as we said, the Houthis are very likely backed by the Iranian government. Fine. That does, again, they didn't attack us. They attacked our oil. And, like, literally, this would be a war for blood for oil. Like, because they blew up the gas that we use to drive our stupid fucking cars around. We have to go and send American boys and girls to go die in Tehran. I just don't see that one being sold to the American people. But again, it doesn't matter because we don't get to vote on our war. So fucking everybody's going to do a racism and just be like, yeah, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, it's all the same, right? And it's like, no, it's literally a completely different culture, a different race of people. Like, this is, just because they're brown and they don't talk like you doesn't mean that, what, fuck it. You guys are just going to do a racism regardless. So, anyway, congratulations, Tom Cotton, who is furiously beating off into his birthday cake right now about the idea of going to war. Like I said,
Tom Cotton doing a "Call Me by Your Name" but on his own birthday cake.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff.
I was gonna say also the strategic oil reserve, like, is to release that for market stabilization is the most Trump thing. That is not there for market stabilization. That is there for holy shit, everything is fucked. This is not for like, oh man, gas is going to be $5 a gallon for a while. And also, again, only 36 days worth of gas based on American consumption. And what do you think they're going to do? They're going to be fucking taking that out to your local Wawa, taking it out to the Quick Trip. Like, oh yeah, that is strategic. Your fucking bullshit SUV is not strategic, motherfucker. So again, this is just based on what little knowledge I know about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This is not a just like, we're just all gonna fucking hook up to these giant tanks over here and gas up our cars, and then we're gonna be good to go. Like, it's literally government owned gas. So if you want to release that, cool, we can do that. If you want your socialism gas, I'm perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, well, so one of the things that I point out too is just to bear in mind, and I'm not super schooled up on the politics of the state of Israel, but I do know that there's an election gambit going on because they failed to form a government, so there's going to be another election, and Netanyahu has been basically got Trump's approval to annex part of the West Bank, and whenever there's an Israeli election, dumb shit starts happening in the region for some reason, and it winds up being parlayed into Israeli domestic politics. So in a way, I mean, I don't want to go and start tinfoil hatting this stuff, but I don't know. I mean, the Saudis are dumb enough to murder a Washington Post journalist who is an American citizen in the Saudi embassy in Ankara, Turkey, or the consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. So I mean, like they're dumb enough to do this kind of thing. Like I feel like it can't be overstated how dumb both the leadership of Saudi Arabia and the leadership of the United States are at this current moment. And if there was ever a historical gathering of people dumb enough to false flag themselves into whatever the fuck this is going to be, it's these people. Like, the only thing that they've got in more abundance than cynicism is total fucking incompetence. And I feel like that's the way you have to examine this. That's the lens through which you have to perceive whatever happens, whatever they say. I don't know if you guys all know this about I don't know if you guys all know this about Mike Pompeo, but so famously, Mike Pompeo was an Army officer. I think he was a West Point grad, so he did his 5 years of mandatory post-West Point service. He got out in 1991, and because of the fact that his unit was deploying to the Gulf War in early 1991, late 1990, he was on the way out, so he stayed on Rear D in Germany, and then, ETS'd out of the Army, and then went on to be whatever dumb shit you do when you want to be a right-wing asshole. The funny thing is, he, for the longest time, claimed to be a Gulf War veteran because his unit had deployed and he was in that unit, but he wasn't on the deployment because he was in the process of leaving the military. And it wasn't until he faced scrutiny for this that he wound up like amending his bio and just basically being that he's an Army veteran, but admitting to the fact that he's not actually a Gulf War veteran. It's not that he, if you want to get shitty about it and start being like, oh, well, you were just in Kuwait, you didn't go over the border or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, he didn't even go to Saudi Arabia. He didn't deploy because he was getting out of the Army. And of course, this would be the kind of thing that they would harangue a Democratic politician. When you think about Richard Blumenthal, they always harangue him about how he didn't see as much combat in Vietnam as he claimed to have, and so on and so. Or people like John Kerry, who legitimately saw combat. They're like, oh, well, you were just hunting it down to get awards because you're a pussy. Like, it doesn't matter. And there's no point in trying to burnish your I'm a combat veteran credentials, because then you just wind up sounding like, I don't know, like you're trying to be Jim Mattis and you wound up sounding like Beto O'Rourke or fucking Pete Buttigieg. Like, it means nothing. It's not useful. It's Democrats trying to out-hua the Republicans will never work. So it's stupid. But I do find it funny that you have this absolute confluence of morons. You have Tom Cotton, who joined the Army basically because he finished Harvard Law School or whatever the fuck, and he was like, hey, it's time for me to be an Army man so that I can become a Republican senator. You have Mike Pompeo, you have Donald Trump, you have Mohammed bin Salman. This is just, it's like the perfect storm of morons. And so I have no idea what's going to happen next, and I don't like to, stake a a bet on anything with regard to these situations because they're really dumb. And so far, all of the things that have looked like impending disasters haven't actually happened because no one's willing to actually pull the trigger. But all bets are off because they're really dumb, and it feels like their ability to read the room has gotten even more diminished as Trump's been in power and been unpopular, and these various scandals have played out. So who even knows?
I want to go back to the tinfoil hattery of this attack possibly being an inside job.
Oh, it's 100% possible that it's a fucking false flag. 100% possible. That's the thing. They are so dumb, and I guarantee you that just like there's like the iMessage receipts from Jamal Khashoggi where they're like, let's murder this guy and dismember him, in their text messages. I guarantee you that if this is like a false flag thing, or that it was they knew it was going to happen and they allowed it to happen for political expedience, I guarantee you there'll be a fucking paper trail because they're that dumb.
Well, I just like the idea that they're like Saudi Arabia is like, we really want to get America into this war. What does America love? And it's like Saudi Arabia is 15 years behind the tables on it. Just like oil, they love oil, right? They want to do oil. It's like, man, we're all like, don't blow up our avocado toast, man. Just keep that. Just don't blow up our avocado groves in Mexico, and we'll be fine. They want to attack oil, and it's like, nobody. He said nobody's really feeling that war. Like, the idea of like, well, if we attack the oil in Saudi Arabia, then that cripples the world economy. And like, honestly, like I said, anybody smart is just like, well, I mean, we really should not be using oil. It's pretty fucking obvious that we shouldn't be fucking doing this anymore. So why don't we go ahead and not do the oil thing anymore? But unfortunately, smart people aren't in charge around here anymore. So that's just we're going to end up getting into a war because you've got Tom Cotton, who's just horny to kill brown people. You've got President Trump, who has literal holes in his brain, and you've got the Prince of Saudi Arabia, who, I don't know if you know this, somebody found his Steam profile. And that man has some fucked up video games that he likes to play. That dude's really into some like horny anime JRPGs.
Yes. Well, I mean, so one thing that I would point out too is that I saw a tweet go out earlier this weekend that I think does have some potential credence to it, in the sense that Donald Trump's a moron, but also he's a moron with no ability to form new memories. Everything that he does is like related to the dream world he's living in which it's still the 1980s and the 1990s. But Donald Trump's also old enough to remember the oil shocks in the 1970s. And one presumes that if he does realize what this might entail, that he also understands that it's not good for incumbent presidents if you completely fuck the economy intentionally, which he's already basically doing with the trade war stuff, but then even more so with regard to oil prices, which massively hit Americans because of the extent to which the American economy is dependent upon workers driving themselves to and from work. And so I like I said, I feel like there are smart ways to read this, but it's always dangerous to make predictions because, I mean, we all, with some of the dumb stuff that was happening, the kind of like attempts at grabbing headlines in Venezuela with the stupid aid convoy over the closed bridge and dumb shit, and Elliot Abrams going down to just like do his like whiny nerd voice in Congress about like, how dare you, sir? I serve the people of America. Like, we all thought there was going to be a war in Venezuela, or at least we thought it was possible. And so far, they've managed to fuck that up royally, and nothing has happened. Now, I guess it's it's less to do with, oh, don't take them seriously, because I do think you should take them seriously, but more to do with the fact that they're so incompetent, and there is this constant refrain with Donald Trump's presidency where they say they're going to do something that sounds like what the Republicans would do if they weren't in power, but then when they realize they could do it, but it's a stupid idea, they don't. And with the exception being obviously the tax cuts, because that's what Mitch McConnell is in office to do, is give rich people tax cuts. But when it comes to like their foreign policy shit, they wind up, it's the constant dog who caught the car phenomenon. And so in that regard, I'm going to take any prediction with a grain of salt. but also we stan a Houthi drone operator who explodes Saudi oil tanks using like the same technology that people use to take dumb overhead camera footage, but managing to deliver a bomb and completely fuck the global economy. I mean, that is some legendary gaming right there. And I am sure that even Mohammed bin Salman can respect the amount of gamer fortitude required to basically do Star Fox, but in real life.
I mean, do you remember a couple years ago when ISIS was using store-bought drones? They were just basically attach like an 80 millimeter or a 155 to a drone, arm it, and then like just take it on up. Slap a GoPro. Yeah, they'd slap a GoPro on it so they can get some good footage, and they would just fly that shit over because they're small. You can get them high enough. You know, shit's loud enough over there sometimes, and just fucking all right, hit the button, release the bomb, and would bomb like Iraqi forces with fucking
Jesus.
with literal store bought quadcopter. Well, not quadcopter. They had to get the big ones because they were.
I was gonna say they had to get a big one. A 155 round is like 98 pounds. So I mean, like
I may be exaggerating with the 155. I do know they were dropping mortar rounds via giant ass fucking drone.
Oh yeah, I mean that makes sense. Like, yeah, if you're dropping like a 60 millimeter or an 82 millimeter mortar, that's one thing. But 155 millimeter artillery round is really big. Now that would be cool, but that's like that stops being drones and starts being like airships from Final Fantasy.
And that's what makes me wonder. Like with all of this that's happening, the only thing that I'm interested in is what were they using and how did they manage this. And by that I mean the Houthi drone operator. Like, what did they get their hands on that was able to literally cripple the world economy? To make the world, well, not cripple, but to make the world economy shit itself for a little bit. Like, obviously, we've seen how the Bolton gets fired, the stock market goes up. Trump tweets, the stock market goes down. We wave our dicks at China, stock market shits itself. But really, I want to know, like, what did you get? Where did you get it? What did you attach to it? And who flew this thing over there? Because goddamn, that dude deserves something. Like, what? No matter what side you're on of this conflict, certainly I am not on the side of terrorist attacks or blowing up oil or whatever, because that's dangerous, guys. It's dangerous. Don't want anybody to die in your war. But also, that is just really fucking impressive. And I just, every clap emoji for that guy for managing, or those two guys or whatever, because that is just incredible.
Well, I mean, I guess the thing that I would say too is just I want to know if they have footage of the attack, like heroic GoPro footage, because there's a part of me that just, when you think about how many tanks they had to blow up in order to make this happen, how many storage tanks that is, there must be like a convoy of drones flying through the air set to the right of the Valkyries kind of shit. Like, this is incredible. This is there are some amazing Houthi memes ready to be made. Like, I'm really on the edge of my seat about this. And also, I just got to point out, this is everything that we have said, we've talked about on this show. There used to be the sort of standard Department of Defense, Pentagon press conference, officials going on TV, giving interviews, various statements being put out, etc. But instead, all of this is us interpolating actually, I'll say that again because I think I may be using that word wrong. All of this is us extrapolating from a single tweet, really, that Donald Trump wrote, where he said...
We don't get any info anymore, yeah.
Yeah, he just said, Saudi Arabia oil supply was attacked. There is reason to believe that we know the culprit, are locked and loaded depending on verification, but are waiting to hear from the kingdom as to who they believe was the cause of this attack and under what terms we would proceed! So, who even knows? But all I can say is never, ever underestimate how fucking dumb all these people are.
Yeah, incredibly stupid. Every last one of them, and for some, and like really, like we give them shit for being stupid, but like it's our fault. I mean, no matter what you want to blame it on, it is the fault of the American people, and that's why That's why, Nate, everybody should just come on over to socialism. Let's we realize we're done with it. We're done with the whole capitalism thing. We're done with this whole military industrial complex. It's all just like, okay, we get it. We don't want to do a fucking war in an eighth country right now where we can't afford it and we can't do it and we're not going to win it. We're just going to waste bodies and die and kill people. And the only people who win is like Raytheon and McDonnell Douglas. Dismantle all of it. Just come be socialist now, guys. It's like, it's real fucking easy. There is no, like, at this point in time, there is no saving capitalism. And that's what I try to tell. Like, what you think? Who was it? Somebody said. I can't remember the tweet, but somebody said that that Eric Prince. We should give the wars over to Eric Prince, who will be able to win the wars and save us money. And I'm just like, I don't know if you know how a mercenary works. They only make money if there's a war. So why would they stop one? And see, when conservatives say, "Oh, this is economics 101. That's why socialism will never win." Economics 101 also would tell me that, 1 + 1 = 2, and Blackwater plus war equals a shitload of money for wars. That I don't, that we don't even go fight in anymore. They just, hire some fucking weird goons.
Yeah, the idea that you're like, oh, I'm gonna give this war over to some mercenaries so they can end it and then be out of work. A thing that will definitely happen.
Yeah. I'm sure that Eric Prince has nothing more than just like, yeah, man, I have the way to solve things in Afghanistan and bring peace and harmony through, via, the way that I drop bombs on compounds is, just so much better than the U.S. Army ever could. So I don't know, man. There's just no, honestly, I don't believe that there's any saving the American, the way that Americans do war anymore. Like, other than a complete, like, we do need to completely bring everything in, figure out what the fuck we're doing, take like 5-10 years or so, maybe keep a couple strategic bases overseas, but just be like, what the fuck, guys, what the fuck are we doing? What are we doing? What's our goals here? Like, I just want to come in, like, I don't know if you've ever had a commander that's just walked into everybody, like, some mission that gets fucked up, and you just have, like, the major walk in, and it's like, what the fuck's happening here? Who's stepping on my dick right now? That's what I need to do to, like, literally the Department of the Army and all of the... But I'm just a staff sergeant. Nobody listens to me. Though everybody should.
It's interesting, and we're going to plug the bonus. We'll have a bonus cut here at the end of this episode, but it just as a FYI before we start our next segment, I wanted to just let people know that one of the things that always boggles my mind about this is that, people say that we don't have money to do the kinds of things that would need to quickly transition to renewables. We don't have the kind of things that would allow people to avoid being dependent on oil markets or on markets in general, etc. And what is amazing to me is in our bonus episode that we did with Hassan Piker from the Young Turks, yes, that same Hassan Piker, the one who made Dan Crenshaw mad and sad, we talk about this and the economics of, how the military spends money, what it spends money on, and the idea that how do you qualify the lost opportunities, to sort of paraphrase Dwight Eisenhower, that come along with a country that has people in such abject poverty and servitude, but is spending $770,000 million every year on basically bloated military profiteering. Sucks. It sucks really bad, and we talk about this in a little bit of detail, and so it's frustrating to me because if I don't necessarily believe that these morons are going to get their way with a war with Iran, because I think in their hearts they probably know that they'll lose. But regardless, it's dumb. And similarly, when Francis was talking about like, oh, we've got to bring it in and reform things, I think one of the problems that we've also been talking about is the kind of weird culture warrior aspect of the military, in which the right has been more or less openly recruiting and, joining the military and being quite open about their affiliation with white nationalist and right-wing groups. We've said about this a lot on the show, that you can basically be right-wing or apolitical in the military, but you're not allowed to be left-wing. And we also encountered a military.com article with the headline, "Congress wants the military to report extremism in the ranks. Here's why that will be tough." That came out on September 14th, and we'll link to the story in the show notes. And the big summary, I think, is that There have been incidents of right-wing terror in the military, people trying to recruit, people planning on conducting attacks. There was the Coast Guard lieutenant who wanted to murder Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Nancy Pelosi and Ilhan Omar and all the other boogeymen of the right. But who also, had open white nationalist affiliations, and this is apparently not a surprise to people who serve with him. There have been Marines who have been punished or kicked out for being members of right-wing militias. There was an army soldier who was kicked out because he had fought it was very open about the fact that he had fought with a neo-Nazi group in Ukraine before he had joined the military in the United States. Things along those lines, but I don't think that there is a commensurate amount of concern towards right-wing extremism in the military as there is and was even more so after, for example, the Fort Hood shooting with regard to what they would call Islamic extremism or kind of reactionary international terrorist kind of motivations with people who support Al-Qaeda, ISIS, those kinds of like extremist Islamist ideologies. And I think one of the reasons is that looking at Islam in general, Muslims in particular, as your enemy, is pretty much in line with American foreign policy. And being a racist in the military towards Muslims and towards Islam is not considered particularly bad. I mean, I feel like that's a fair thing to say, that you have to cross a lot of lines before being vitriolic against Muslims gets you in trouble in the military. Whereas you can get in trouble a little more quickly being overtly racist towards minority groups in America, for example. But I mean, even then, it takes a lot of fucking up before you absolutely get nailed to the wall for it. And so one of the lines in this story that really kind of interested me is just describing how difficult it is to establish that somebody is a white nationalist in the military, even if they've done something crazy. Because, as I'm quoting from the story, one of the experts they quoted says, "It's a huge leap to go from somebody who collects or has a number of weapons to someone who is an extremist. It requires both capabilities and intent, so just because someone has guns tells us nothing about their intentions. Even if a mass shooting occurs, it's not always linkable to violent extremism," this expert added. "The issue has to be, what's the motivation? There are plenty of instances where the motivations were unclear," he said, citing the 2017 mass shooting at a country music concert in Las Vegas. And so the point being here is that you've got to really catch people being dumb online, etc., in person, and be able to tie it to who they are in the military, like identify them, dox them in a sense. And even then, there's no guarantee that they're going to, get non-judicial, any kind of significant punishment. They might just get like a counseling statement. I mean, Francis, you and I saw that video of that fucking moron boot private Marine attacking kids who were in a fight at their high school, and the Marine Corps' response is, "Oh, he'll get a counseling statement." It's like, no, that's not anywhere near.
He assaulted minors.
He fucking battered those kids. He flat out battered those kids. He should get kicked out of the Marine Corps and face the civilian justice system and go to prison for felony battery. However, that's not going to happen because those kids aren't white and the Marine Corps doesn't give a fuck. So similarly, even when someone is overtly racist online and you can tie it to them, their name, you've got proof, it's very hard to convince people to actually prosecute these people for it.
Yeah. This reminds me of, I don't know if you saw that some idiot Marine sent the creator of Terminal Lance, sent him a picture of them. They all put their boots together in a way to make a swastika and sent it to this guy. And Max is like, "Is that a fucking swastika?" He's like, "Yeah." And so, Max obviously reports the guy to the Marine Corps because, Max.
Well, Max Uriarte is Jewish, if I'm not mistaken. And he's also not white. And it's like,
yeah, he's not an insane right winger. And he's, that's so.
And these guys they probably didn't even know that. They were just like, haha, we're in the Marines and we do Nazi shit. Isn't this cool?
Yeah. And then just send it to like a guy who's absolutely going to do something about it. And then that guy apparently just got busted down to like E1. It's like, that's not what is this doing? What is this teaching anybody? And like, what's the follow up? Like, okay, you punished him, but what's going to be the thing? Did you just piss him off more and now he's just going to be an even more pissed off Nazi? Or are you doing anything? Like, not only do I not trust the ability of the military to ferret out white nationalism, because to be a white nationalist in the military, all you have to do is just not out loud saying white nationalist shit, which, to be fair, is difficult for some of them. But for, I'm sure, a lot of them who we don't know about, all you have to do is be like, I hate Hajis and I love guns. And I mean, to me, that's white nationalist shit. To the military, that's just kind of how you're supposed to be.
Just the idea of being able to convince the military that soldiers referring to Iraqis, Afghans, people from the Middle East as Hajis should be considered a slur on par with other slurs that we recognize as offensive. That's a challenge. I mean, I've heard field grades say it, and they don't give a shit. Like they not in the sense of like admonishing people to not use the word, but rather just like referring to them. I had a field grade operations on like the S3 of an incoming battalion who had never been to Afghanistan but had only been to Iraq tell me, I'm not super worried about cultural stuff. I know how all these Hajis think. And it's like, bro, you haven't been in this country before. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But that guy's a major. And so it's like that attitude, that dismissive, totalizing attitude, which in my opinion is absolutely racist. The military doesn't see that as a problem. And even when soldiers do or Marines do dumb shit that involves like trying to troll people online with racism, it's got to be A, really egregious, B, tied to a person's account that you can verify their identity, and C, in the timeline of someone prominent enough to get a response from the Department of Defense. Because most units, commands don't give a shit. They absolutely don't.
I will tell you, the military does know that it's offensive and that we shouldn't be doing it. I remember taking a class on cultural sensitivity. It was kind of like the EO training, and this was fucking a decade ago or so. But one of the things, like, it's one of those like choose your own adventure kind of things. And one of them was a couple guys hanging out in the back of a tank or whatever, and just like, oh, the fucking hatchets. And you, as the sergeant, is like, what are you supposed to do? And the correct answer was to be like, hey, man, these people live here, and we're supposed to respect them. We're here to, blah, blah, blah. So you should treat them with respect and not call them Hajis. And it's like, cool. Oh, we're not actually going to do that, though. Like, that's a lesson that's not actually going to go anywhere. And that's the thing. That's the other problem, is that not only do I not trust the military to ferret out white nationalism, but even when it does, I don't expect it to do anything useful or productive with it. Like, okay, cool, you found a white nationalist. What are we going to do? Like, are you going to kick him out? Are you going to try to rehabilitate him? Are you just going to reduce him in rank and then hope that, like, the command, which probably...
Yeah, when he PCSs to another unit and then it's off his record, or, like, it's not a big deal, especially if it's, like, a company grade Article 15, and then he goes to another unit and then he promotes, and now he's an NCO and he's still racist. He's just a little bit smarter about fucking saying it online.
Yeah, it's like when a cop gets fired for being, brutalizing some citizen, and then they get fired, and they're like, "That's cool. I'm just going to go 2 counties over or whatever, and get a job there and brutalize people over there because nobody gives a fuck, because that's just like the expected behavior." And that's the thing, is that the military doesn't really have a line in the sand for white nationalism. It's like, okay, so we know that being racist towards Muslims and owning guns is not white nationalism. We know that a Nazi is white nationalism. But where is the actual, like, middle ground here that the military is going to consider white nationalism? Personally, the guy saying Haji and owning guns, that's my line in the sand. In fact, we could probably go back a little bit, further back, and hey, if you want to accuse me of, like, trying to cut the balls off the military so that we're not an effective killing force, good. We should probably stop killing the shit out of people just because they're different than us. We have talked on this podcast numerous times about how the military has absolutely no problem just murking complete families that have nothing to do with terrorist activities just because one guy might be there at that wedding or one person might be in that compound or whatever. So we've got to just kill everybody inside of it to get there. Like, you know what? The balls need to be cut off the military at some point in time. Somebody needs to fucking neuter us, because, like, if this was an actual dog, we would have been put down a long time ago.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think I point this out too. Is, I mean, to perhaps less extremely left-wing people listening to this show who are fans, regardless, who might be questioning the veracity of what we're saying. I just ask you, if you've been in a unit that's deployed, think about all the times that you have heard people say, "Oh, if it was up to me, I would just kill all of them," or "All of them are bad." It's just I'd like to shoot all of them, but there's just you have they'll nail you if you don't have PID.
Turn it into a glass parking lot. That's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah. Or like,
which means nuke the whole place.
Posting LeMayo photos on social media of like, down the sights of your 240 Bravo or down the optics or whatever of something, like aiming at just random civilians on the street and like just people getting laws for that. I mean, that mentality is there and it's been there. And this is just an offshoot of that mentality. This is taking that approach and then applying it to other groups you don't like, whether or not they live in America or not. That's all it is. And if you can't see that, then maybe you have some weird stake in perpetuating that mode of thought. And I mean, I've gotten a lot harsher about this as time's gone on, especially since I got out of the military. It bothered me then, but I realize now that it's even more of a problem because you can see where it leads. And I just feel like anybody who's being honest with themselves, especially if they've been in a combat arms unit, has encountered this. And this mentality, like, swap out the names, swap out the pronouns here, and instead of them saying, oh, if it was up to me, we'd kill all the Afghans or we'd kill all the Muslims, swap it out and say, oh, if it was up to me, we'd kill all the black people, we'd kill all the Jews. Does that bother you? It should bother you. All of it should bother you. And if it doesn't, you're a weak leader and you fucking suck. Anyway, that's me talking. So this week's bonus is very special to us because it was a great conversation we had between ourselves and Hassan Piker from the Young Turks, who's a Twitch streamer, journalist, reporter, all-round fun guy who recently got into some hot water because of comments he made about Dan Crenshaw. And we brought him on to talk about him as an open socialist leftist, what his thoughts are on the military, like his thoughts on this scandal, and the kind of duplicitous ways in which people generate outrage about the concept of someone not being deferential towards the military, when in fact Dan Crenshaw is somebody who's helping to perpetuate the terrible conditions that make veterans and military service members' lives worse. We really enjoyed this, and you can access the full conversation on Patreon, but this is a segment of it just to get an idea of what it sounded like. And there's a link in the show notes to sign up to the Patreon if you want to hear the full thing. Has this been like weird for you because you've gotten that fucking hate spiral of all these assholes? And also the follow-up to that would be like, have you also like talked to veterans who agree with you that like this shit is fucked?
No, of course not. Yeah, no, I have. Look, I have some incredibly close friends that were in the Marines. Like I've always had veteran friends that either understand what we did after serving, or even like active duty military members who are in my fan base who have no issue with the things that I mentioned. Like, it's a job. It's incredibly predatory, like the way that they target like underprivileged youth and like, you know, black and brown kids basically, and dupe them into service. But it's also incredibly exploitative in the sense that, like, you know, they're taking advantage of all of the structural and material inequalities that we have currently in America, like not having access to future opportunities, like being able to pay for college. So if you go to the military, you'll get a college degree, you know, or at the very least you can get a Camaro. Like it is a really harmful and exploitative situation that they subjugate a bunch of young men and women to. A bunch of young men and women to. So I sympathize with that. I understand it. So I don't like harbor resentment. I'm not like some fucking crazy like Maoist third worldist or whatever who's just like, oh, you're a murderer, you're like a baby killer, like if you were in the military. That's not my like automatic position, and it never has been. I see it as it's a job. It's not a good job. It's a very tough job. And the outcomes of that job are not great. They're pretty terrible for the most part. Especially if you are even like heavily specialized, or if you're like a Navy SEAL or whatever, you do deal with a lot of death and destruction, and that's not great. But it's not like there's like a forced draft. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like these are people who are like, I mean, you guys as well. I don't know. I would love to hear why you guys joined the service, but people just say, hey, for one reason or the other, like, I'm going to go and join. I want to join the American military, whether it's because of pride, because you're a patriot, because you love your country, or because you were duped at some point. And so I have a lot of sympathy. I don't think that like you're an automatic baby murderer just because you served, but it also definitely means like I'm not going to respect you just because you served. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Francis, you were going to say something.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say that I joined because I wanted to be all that I could be, and then they changed the motto, and then I was fucking pissed.
Yeah.
I do say
Yeah, I
that
mean-
I enjoyed the close up parking at Lowe's though, where it's for veterans only. That's why I did it. Is for the discounts.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get look. One of my main moderators is a trans military veteran. Okay, and she no longer has access to the VA. Like she absolutely despises the Department of Defense. I mean, especially considering that she's trans, right? So
Yeah.
like, so like seeing that and seeing so many veterans get fucked over by the American government, like how can you still sit there and be like, no, we want the little like Lowe's parking spot, and then everyone just respect us by default. It's okay if I can't pay for insulin, like as long as I get $2.50 off watching the latest like Avengers movie on a Tuesday, then it's fine.
Yeah, and the private companies are going to do whatever they want to do, but it certainly does come down to the American government will grab you and put you into a grinder. And to be fair, when it comes to grinders, it's not the worst one because you get some decent benefits out of it. And if you get one of those jobs that doesn't require you to get shot at on a regular basis, it's not too bad. But if you do come out of that grinder all fucked up, then it just kind of spits you out on the streets. And it's like, yeah, we have, the VA is good in some places, and the VA is helpful to a lot of people, but like there certainly is I guess disposableness to the American soldier. And and we talked about it, today as well, that there's military bases that are, covered in mold. There's housing that has had windows boarded up for months and months and months, that have like children and spouses of military families living inside of these hovels. Basically, I certainly have stayed in my share of places that are absolutely disgusting. And also, we have a lot of soldiers who are coming out saying, "Hey, you know what? All these burn pits are actually giving me cancer, and there's nothing that the military is really going to do about that." And so, whenever I hear we need to support the troops, we need to do this or that for the troops, like, cool, do that. But I never see anything. It's always in conjunction with, you want to do something about the refugees. Well, what about the troops? You want to do something about the homeless. Well, what about the homeless troops? The troops end up becoming this like, well, we need to help them first. It's like, cool, we can do that. We can do both, but also we probably should have been doing that for years. Like if in 2019, after 18 years of war, you're still crossing your arms and full, cinching up and saying, well, we got to help the troops first. Like, bitch, we've had an opportunity to do that and we haven't. And if you're still going to sit here and try to pretend like the government has any sort of, positive, any positive, like, push forward on this, I regrettably inform you that they do not. All they want to do is take us and use us and continue the Ponzi scheme that is the military industrial complex.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I hate it. I came back from my last deployment, went to a baseball game, and when the Cardinals hit a home run, there were fireworks, and I had a massive panic attack and tried to climb over about 10 people. That was cool. That was a war that really shouldn't have happened, and it was all fucked up from
Fuck's
it.
sake, man.
Yeah. Like, and my father told me later, he was just like, and my father's a veteran. My father he wasn't in combat overseas. He was in combat during race riots in Kansas City in the 60s. But he was just like, dear God, I thought that the fucking government had broken my son. And I was like, kind of, they did, Dad. They really fucking did. But it's okay because now I'm a socialist, just like he is. So it all kind of worked out in the end. Just took a little bit of time and a lot of drinking.
Yeah. That, like, what you just described is exactly the reason why I get kind of annoyed with people who are like, oh, you spit on a veteran or whatever. Like there's a very small portion of the left that actually unironically is playing out that meme that right wingers try to strawman the entirety of the left as. and it does frustrate me a little bit. But it's not like, I mean, they're few and far between. They're not like they're not representative. I wouldn't consider myself to be a part of that either. I don't know. I just like it. It just sucks. Like I really I hate the way we treat veterans in this country, but I also at the same time am constantly conflicted because like if I feel like if we don't break through this like troop respect mentality that justifies all of the awful acts that we like all of the violent things that we do around the world, because it's like the same part of it's like same cycle of like that same cycle of military violence and like American imperialism and justification of American imperialism. If we don't break through that somehow through humor and through instances like this, like how else are we going to ever get Americans to realize like, no, it's just, you know, this is a really shitty job. The outcomes are really shitty. We should probably not have it anymore in the way that we do.
And I feel the way that we do that is that, you know, people like to say, you know, it's not about the troops. Like, sure, the troops, but also like literally everybody else. Also, you know, the homeless who didn't join the military, or the
people with PTSD who didn't join the military but who have it and suffer from it.
Right,
you know,
and
like,
who need like, because I can get help from my PTSD, and I have gotten help from my PTSD. But like, if you're not a member of the military, there's not necessarily, and you don't have, you know, healthcare, you don't have access to mental health or a psychiatrist. Guess what? You're fucked. And you just get to self-medicate with that the best way that you can. And generally, that's not a winning combination there. And so what it comes down to is that it's not like I joke about how I like the 10% discount at Lowe's, but like honestly, if that went away, and also in came like housing for everybody and Medicare or universal health care, and, you know, making sure that everybody in this country is taken care of, and making sure that, you know, refugees and immigrants and all that are taken care of, that's fine. I'll get rid of that. Like, you don't have to respect me. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a fan. So those of you who are zine receivers, those should be in your hands by now, hopefully, depending on USPS. We're recording this on Monday. Everything is packed and addressed and stamped and just needs to be dropped off at the post office. So provided that happens, which I don't see not happening, those should be in your hot little hands Thursday or so for our overseas people a little bit longer. Nate, I got them coming to you too. And if you really want to get in on that, that's that's on our Patreon, patreon.com/hellofaWayToDie. We've got various levels. The $10 a month level is what will get you the zine on a quarterly basis. Those of you, so we've got this one out. This one's for September, so we're rolling into the new one. We are going to start accepting submissions as soon as you guys can start writing them. The new one is going to be about work. Basically jobs you've had, whether it be military, maybe not military. You want to talk about unions, I'm going to start bugging Shocks to write about being a union lawyer or something about unions. Any way that a union's helped you or maybe even hurt you. Hey, you know what? Like my wife and I both were in grocer unions here in St. Louis, and they weren't that great. So, you know, we certainly will accept the good, the bad, the criticism, everything. So anything that you want to write about work, 750 to 1,000 words or so, or 500 to 1,000 words, anywhere in between there. So you can submit those to sergeantjoker@hellofawaytodie.com. You can also just DM me directly. If you're already a member of the Patreon, obviously I'm in the Discord, so you can always pop a message to me there. For anything else, remember we have YouTube. Our YouTube channel does, we have once a week updates on Thursdays from me. Those run about 10 minutes or so, but those are also on my timeline since I stream it to Twitter. But we have the episodes up on YouTube as well. You know, all kinds of different ways to get in contact with us. If you like us here, whichever way that you're listening to us, you know, we appreciate it. We appreciate whatever rating system, thumbs up that you can give us on whatever platform you listen to. You know, iTunes, comments, 5 stars, SoundCloud, thumbs up or shares. Libsyn, I don't know if Libsyn does any kind of sharing or anything like that, but also YouTube. We always say we understand not everybody can financially support us, and that is perfectly fine. Even if you do have the money and don't want to give the money, but you enjoy the free content, we are happy to have you here. And we just ask that if you've got somebody out there who might be wondering a little bit about the military, but doesn't want to hear some insane racist say a bunch of insane racist shit about the military, guess what? We've got a fix for that. It's called What a Hell of a Way to Die. So thank you all. And Nate, we'll talk to you next week.
Yep. Have a good one.